Good morning. I am a little nervous, and I made the mistake of having coffee that had a little caffeine in it this morning, which I don't normally do, so now I'm extra nervous. All right, so I felt really blessed that Ryan asked me to do this, and I told him, I don't know, probably like 6 months ago, if my name ever bubbles to the top, feel free to reach out, and he did, so here I am. So, condensing my life into 10 or 13 minutes, we're going to give this a whirl. I grew up Jewish. I was bat mitzvahed. That is another piece of this journey. I also grew up as a child of a very bitter divorce that, 54 years later is still fairly bitter, which seems a little crazy. And then my mother remarried. And she turned out she married someone who was abusive to her children. So I grew up in an abusive and then drug-addicted household, where my mother made the excuse that giving us marijuana in first grade was because we would have gotten it out on the streets if we hadn't gotten it at home, because she had her own stuff. So at age 11, I had the courage to tell my dad and my stepmother what was going on and said that I couldn't go back. The first time I told them I had to go back down to live with my mother. My mother was very upset. I don't want you to leave me. I can't live if you do that. So of course I didn't leave. And then again at age 11, told my dad and said, I can't go back. If I go back, I won't be able to come back up. So my dad kept me. My stepmother agreed, and I moved up with my dad, which was a safe environment, but still not a healthy one, because my stepmom and my mother were best friends. So my dad says there wasn't anything until after the divorce. My mother believes differently, so I became part of a triangle between my stepmother and my mother, which continues to this day as much as I try to bank that down. So what was my life before Jesus? It was pretty much a mess. I had very little self-confidence. When I was a little girl, if I got yelled at, I would run and hide under a bed because I couldn't bear it. I just didn't believe anything about myself. I didn't think I was worth anything. I was fortunate because my way to cope kind of became as a perfectionist. So I coped that way, which was also pressure in its own way. So I muddled through my life. I was very critical of myself and of others. I was very judgmental. I thought my only role models at that point were my dad and my stepmom, who in many ways were good role models, in other ways not. And so when I was raising my children, I was doing things the way they did them. And luckily for me, my daughter wanted to join Youth for Christ in middle school. And I was like, well, that makes me a little uncomfortable because I'm Jewish and so are you. But, there are way worse things you could be involved in, so sure, let's do this. And God bless Jay Davies, because a lot of times when people find out I'm Jewish, they want to pick my brain. And he wanted to pick my brain. And so finally I said, you know what, Jay, I can't answer these questions. I need to actually go read the Bible. And so I began to read the Bible. And it began changing my life. I was married a second time I had a very bitter divorce. Married a second time for like a heartbeat. And that divorce had happened. I had bought a house that was too much for just me, thinking I was going to have 2 incomes. So my life was a little bit going in the toilet again. And I started to read. And it started to change my life. About 3 years into that, my son told me he wanted to die. And this was at age 15. My very beloved, my step-grandparents were just beloved second parents to me. They were amazing people, and we lost my Zadie very suddenly. It wasn't sudden for him. He had had cancer that metastasized, but he didn't tell anyone. So when he went to the hospital and didn't come home, we were all shocked. Then my son tells me he wants to die. I'm in a financial problem. I'm kind of not knowing what to do. So I keep plodding along. And a friend of mine, I had started going to a church, felt every week that they were talking directly to me, even though I sat it was like theater style, and I was like as far back as you could get, and it felt like the minister was like, you, I'm talking to you. So left in tears most Sundays. And then a friend of mine said, you know what, you need to come to our small group. And I'm like, I don't need to be in a group of Bible thumpers. Like, that's just not who I am. And I'm still struggling with this whole church thing. So she's like, no, that's the exact reason you need to come. And so I did. And I still have 6 women in my life that have been in my life for about the last 14 to 15 years who are amazing. And they've walked through very difficult times with me. So now we fast forward a little bit. My son is still struggling. I had to kick him out of the house. He was using drugs because he was trying to self-medicate. Turns out he had been molested by a physician that I took him to evaluate him for ADHD. I had sent him to live with his dad, which went very poorly. Went and picked him up, brought him home about 9 months later. And then in 2013, I began to see him unravel. But God was already big in my life way before I even noticed it. And I had met Kevin in 2013. And if God hadn't been in my life, I wouldn't have given Kevin the time of day, because I always chose self-centered, selfish people. And Kevin is anything but that. He is this good man who helped me through a time I couldn't have gotten through. So I met him in March 30th, because we celebrate that every year. And a few months later in August, my son had a psychotic break, his first psychotic break. That was when he was actually hospitalized. I had noticed it before then. And I wasn't sure we were going to get him back. I had never experienced it before. And I was way angry with God. And I just told this story to Rob and Noreen that I was in the basement. And I was cursing God. And Kevin stepped back like lightning is coming. And I said, no, God can take this, because the God I know can take this. And if Kevin hadn't been in my life, I don't know that I could have gotten through this it's been 11 years. It's been 14 years since Justin first wanted to die. It's been 11 years since we found out about his psychotic break, which he had several more. He attempted suicide, almost succeeded twice. And I don't know how I would have gotten through that without God. I really wouldn't have been able to. God showed me how to walk with my son with an open heart when my parents were telling me, you shouldn't let him be doing this, and you need to be this, and you need to be that. And I said, you know what? I need to walk with my son. I can't change what he's going through, but God can. And I need to walk alongside him and support him. And because of what I had been through as a child, I had a heart to know what he was going through as a child and then as an adult. And so I've stood by him, regardless of what he has done, and walked. And so God saved him by saving me, because if it weren't for that, Justin would not be alive today. I wouldn't have him, and he still struggles. I still pray for him fervently, but he has begun to heal. And God did give me a vision of him, Justin, in someone's arms. That was just all I could see was white, and they were just wiping him clean. I don't know if that's this life or the next life, but I know at some point he will be fully healed. And so how did I find Horizon? That's actually a funny story. Kevin and I were in North Carolina in the Outer Banks, and we passed by this little non-denominational church, and I really wanted to go. And we were there for 2 weeks, so we went. For 2 Sundays, we went to this little church. And so then I thought I found them on Facebook, and I joined. It wasn't the church in North Carolina. It was Horizon. And we weren't at Horizon yet, but then the pandemic hit. And in 2020, that was when I really almost lost Jess. And the church where I was going was like, how's it going? And walking away. And I didn't get support. And they were like, we have support for you. But they didn't. They were too busy. And so we wandered around, church to church, went to several different ones. And one Sunday I said to Kevin, you know what? I joined this church on Facebook. Why don't we try it? Like, this can be the last one, and then we'll just give up for a little while and take a break. And we came. And the very first time we came, we were like, this is it. This is where we need to be. And what we really needed is community and family. And that is what Horizon brings to us, which is why, even though I'm a little nervous, although I think it's a lot the caffeine, I'm like, it feels okay to stand up and share my story with you all, because it feels like I'm sharing it with family. And, you know, what does following Jesus look like for me today? I try always, not necessarily well, but try to walk in the ways of Jesus. I try my best to not be judgmental, even if it's just in my head. I catch myself and I'm like, stop that thought, stop it right now. Like, that's not what you want to do. And I don't know if you all remember those bracelets that had WWJD on them for like a couple years. When I get to a spot and I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? I'm like, okay, WWJD, what would Jesus do? And that's what I try to do. And again, it's way not perfect. But trying to do that has given me a peace through all the challenging things in my life that allows someone who meets me today to be like, she didn't really go through anything. She's got it together. And it's just that peace. So it's not from me at all. I would be a wreck. It's God who gave me a sense of myself, an identity in him instead of my failable family, who's wonderful but failable. But my identity is in him, and that totally changed how I interact with everyone. And it made me, and I don't even say it made me a different person, I say it's making me the woman he created me to be. And while that's a journey I won't finish here, it's a journey I hope that I continue on. And so it also has given me an attitude of gratitude, which, you know, just feels like this platitude. Not too many rhymes. But that sense of, regardless of what's going on, that I have an attitude of gratitude. And my son he's apologized to me several times. Mom, I'm so sorry for what I put you through. And I said, you know what, Justin? It's okay. Because of what you have gone through, I have grown a faith deeper than I ever imagined. I wouldn't have this faith that lands on a rock if I hadn't walked this path with you. And so Ryan asked, was there a song that meant something or kind of was really meaningful? And for me, it's Oceans. Because when God says, let me take you deeper than you've ever been, I'm like, whew, you have. And it brought tears to my eyes every time I've heard it. And now, when I think about that, I think, how much deeper are you going to take me? And Mother Teresa says that God won't give us more than we can handle. But I disagree. I think God often gives us more than we can handle, because that way we learn to lean on him and not on ourselves. Thanks so much for listening.